curriculum reform, she has led Pakistan's computer science curriculum overhaul, benefiting 20 million students. She has worked with leading organizations such as LUMS and the Citizen Foundation. This session is organized to help you guys brainstorm ideas for our flagship all women Ideathon challenge, Parwaz-e-Takhayyul. The challenge requires you to pitch ideas pertaining to UN sustainability goals. We have a cash prize pool of 60,000 rupees, and the winners will get an opportunity to pitch their idea to NIC Aerospace Technologies, bypassing 16,000 applicants. The applications will close on the 9th of Feb, so please join me in welcoming Sadaf Rehman. Over to you, Sadaf.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. This is so exciting to hear. I am going to be sharing my presentation. Just give me 1 second and just let me know whenever this has been shared. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Okay, so firstly, I'd like to kick off by saying it's such an honor to be here. I am happy to share my experience, with my startup, and I hope it can help all of you as well. This webinar at Parwaz-e-Takhayyul is such an interesting concept. Kudos to the team. You all have done an amazing job. Special shout out to Amna, Sadaf, and Janet. Who I was coordinating with. I think the topic today is about how you take something from a side project to a startup. Maybe this is something you're building, I don't know, because you're interested in the area. It's something you've been curious about. It's a problem you faced, you wanted to solve. But then, how do you really turn that idea into a real sustainable business? And that's a completely different challenge altogether. And in this session, what I'm hoping we'll do is break down the key steps and then help you move from idea to execution. And we'll cover things about how to validate, scale your idea, explore monetization, funding strategies, discuss how to leverage networks and mentorship to grow smartly. And more importantly, I think these are all real challenges that I have faced personally. And so this is, you'll get kind of like a play by play on what works, what doesn't, what founders often get wrong. And I'm hoping by the end of the session that you'll have a clearer roadmap for turning your idea into something real, something impactful, and hopefully something that will make the world a better place. Okay, so before we begin, why don't you guys put in the chat, where are you in terms of your idea stage right now? And if you have an idea, why don't you go ahead and drop it in the webinar chat as well? This is a small session, it's an interactive session, so I would absolutely love to hear from you throughout as I am presenting. And as you guys are dropping the stuff in the chat, I will super quick go through the agenda more specifically. I'd like to start off with a quote that I think frames today's discussion perfectly, that the best way to predict the future is to create it. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, Peter Drucker is often called the father of modern management. He's like a big thing in MBAs. You will often hear of him in any kind of business context. He's revolutionized the way we kind of think about leadership, business, innovation. And what he's saying here is pretty simple, but I thought it was pretty profound. So you don't have to wait for something to happen, right? Like you don't have to wait for this future to happen. You can actively shape it and create it by taking action today through your idea and through entrepreneurship. And this ties directly to what we'll be covering, specifically how to define your idea, your vision, how to turn it into something impactful and, more importantly, sustainable. And then let's actually start by, Sadaf did a great job introducing me. I think I will skip over this bit, other than just pointing out that I was an undergrad, just like you guys. I'm a computer science undergrad in math, with a math minor from LUMS. I did go on to do my executive MBA as well. And this was after a 10-year gap. And I think I have also kind of spent 20 years working, but working as not in entrepreneurship. So I have worked in very large scale organizations in driving social change for Pakistani youth. And so Code School was my first time entrepreneurship experience. And so what I'm hoping to do is use that my experience as a case study so that if there are any learnings that you guys can take away from them, and benefit and not make the same mistakes that perhaps I might have. Okay, great. So I am just going to dive straight in. So every startup begins with ground zero, right? The idea. But not all ideas are easy, and not all ideas are businesses. So before you think about anything, before you think about funding, before you think about scaling, before you think about strategy, you have to define your idea clearly, right? You have to ask yourself, what problem am I solving? Who are my users? Who are my customers? Why is this important now? So a vague idea doesn't lead to execution. Clarity will. And just to give you an example of how difficult or how easy this is, how does Code School work? So, Code School provides coding literacy to children from ages 6 to 16. I'm guessing this is this area you guys are all familiar with. And so, our innovation is in our tech. So, we screen and hire programmers, and then we train and certify them as teachers. And we deliver an engaging, game based curriculum that we've created or curated, and our platform allows customers to hail a coding class as easily as you can hail an Uber. So we will send the right instructor with the right curriculum at the right time and the right place. So when we were coming up with this at Code School, it was actually, really confusing and very difficult to define what our idea or what the solution was. And I think if you watch that Stanford podcast that I was in a couple of years ago, it's on the Code School website. The host asks me, it was Derek Jeter, is the head of the Stanford program, and I was literally freaking out on air because I was like, the stakes are so high. I have no idea how to properly define what it is we do in a way that will be meaningful for the audience. And this is when we were starting right out. And so, it's difficult because we want to give kids coding literacy, right? Like that's obvious. School going children need to have coding literacy, and we're doing this because it's the kids don't have the skills to navigate a digital future. And right now, just like you're learning math or science, if you're in school, you need to learn coding, right? But if you think about it, are we a school? Are we an education company? Are we an ed tech? Are we a teacher training company? Are we a teacher recruitment company? A curriculum company? A tech company because of the whole Uber for coding, versus a traditional ed tech, which is self-paced. So, we're a little bit of all of those things. And so defining it all in one cohesive elevator pitch is taken us so long, and I genuinely don't think we're very good at it even now. And I think at the heart of it, when we were coming up with what is it that we're going to do, you have to, as entrepreneurs, understand that you're not just solving problems. I mean, obviously, you are solving a problem, but you're also building something that is deeply personal to you, right? And this is where this concept of ikigai comes in. If you guys could just give me a thumbs up if you have kind of seen this before, but or heard of this before. But for those of you who haven't, Ikigai is a Japanese philosophy, and it means that the reason for being, it's this sweet spot between it's what you love, what the world needs, what you're good at, what you can be paid for, and when they all overlap, that's Ikigai. And so I think it's so important when you're looking at what you're doing, it is so important that you try to find that sweet spot. Because when you're doing something you love, it's going to keep you motivated, because entrepreneurship is so hard. Like, I mean, you hear of people saying it, but it is actually incredibly isolating. You will hear more no's and more people telling you that you can't do it than you will ever hear people saying, good job, you're doing a good job. Focusing on what the world needs will ensure that your work creates impact, right? You have to make sure that you're relevant. And leveraging what you're good at means you are bringing unique skills and expertise to the table, whatever those are. And building something that you can be paid for is really important, because until and unless you can create a sustainable business, it will not be able to scale. The what you paid for, I think, is such a critical thing to have to answer for, because I don't believe that if you build, people will come and it will work. I think we don't live in an ecosystem where I feel like that is very forgiving of that kind of enterprise. And so at Code School, for example, how did we think about this, right? So when we were thinking about what is it that we love, what is it that we good at, I'm a digital immigrant. I'm old. I grew up in the 80s. And so, this was before the internet. We were in an analog age. What am I doing teaching kids how to code? But then when you think about it, we actually had a lot of really early exposure to tech. So my dad was a programmer in the 70s. He did his engineering degree and he had done programming at that time in these first generation computers. They were as large as a room, and you had to put in programs as punch cards, just like you feed in paper into a printer. That's how you would have to feed in programs at that time to do these calculations for engineering. But anyway, so we grew up kind of with early exposure to tech. I remember being in third grade, and we had to move this this little turtle around a screen and logo. And that was one of the early stages of that was a precursor to Scratch, actually, because Coding for Kids was founded out of MIT Media Labs in the 70s. And so within a decade it had come to Pakistan and we had gotten exposure to it. And my brother is a coding genius. He taught himself how to code through books. He taught himself C. He was just 8 or 9 years old at the time. And I think by the time he was around 11 or 12, he had become pretty proficient. And so, I think, is it because of that where we had that unique perspective that we could see coding associated with fun and that magic when we were growing up as something new, that allowed us to see this perspective? Baby, it was because I'm a child. I'm a mom to my baby. He was 7 when I started code school. He was, in fact, it was the pandemic, and one of the origin stories for us was, I overheard his coding class, and it was being taught like this horrible, boring version of math. Like, students were someone on some app where they had to move a bee in a square, and the teacher couldn't explain why the bee was moving in a square. The kids didn't want to move the bee in a square. A little girl started crying because she was so angry and frustrated and bored. And absolutely no one, from the parents to the teacher to the school admin, understood that this was a bad coding program. And so it was just like this checkbox activity to do because they'd heard from someone somewhere that it's important. Or often, actually, the more I looked at it, a lot of schools just aren't doing it at all. And it's not just a Pakistan problem or a poor country problem. This is happening in schools around the world. And so I started teaching my son and his friends how to make games. And those kids shared those games with their friends and with their cousins. And it was a pandemic. So before you knew it, we had hundreds of kids reaching out to us saying, hey, please teach our kids. Please teach us how to make games, or please teach our kids how to make games, or and so on and so forth. And so we grew really, really fast. And so, uh, for us, maybe it was that where we found a unique spot. It was a good timing. Maybe the relevance in the world bit is the one that really resonated with us, because we realized very quickly these are some of our earliest students, whether it was Zoya from Canada, or whether it was Mustafa, who's one of our domestic staff students from one of our domestic staff kids pilot. No matter where you are, no matter how much money you have, no matter what country you're in, it is highly unlikely that you will have access to a good coding program. And so, and we realize that there's a trend going on where there is, computer science education. More and more countries are introducing coding, computer science, and coding as a result into their national curricula. And as a result, maybe there was an opportunity for us to step in. So this is just to give you an idea of how you can think of your idea. It's not as simple as just brainstorming at the back of an envelope. You do really need to kind of see where your personal passion, a requirement in the world, where all your unique skills come in. And it can be something simple as well, but do think it through when you're defining it. If you have any questions on this, please do put them in the chat. I would love to address them. I've kept time at the end, and I would love to keep hearing from people. And the moderators, please go ahead and unmute and feel free to kind of, if there is a burning question, feel free to pause me. I would be more than happy to take those questions in the middle of the session as well, if you feel appropriate. Okay, so the second step is validation, because you can sit and think that this is a great idea. And you will say that, this is the best thing that the world is going to see, and I'm going to solve everyone's problems with this, and your positive is going to work. But until and unless other people believe you and the market validates it, through actual kind of purchases, I don't think your idea, you can say that you have a solution. And you have to test it not just in one scenario with your family or your friends. You have to test it across multiple scenarios, multiple geographies. And to give you an example of what that meant for us, this was one of our first failures, right? So we said, okay, coding for kids is a requirement. Schools aren't doing it in Pakistan because at that time nobody was. And we were coming out of the pandemic, and we said, fantastic, let's just make a coding book for young kids. Maybe start with grades 3, 4, and 5, and let's make sure we do this right. And so we put this together fairly quickly because we had been teaching online classes, and we had a sense of what needed to be done, what the path needed to be. And we took this to almost every major school in Pakistan, and all of them were like, no, we don't want to do this, because we didn't realize that the existing kind of ecosystem, we didn't know enough about the market and the market requirements, or this end user that was the school. We didn't understand how they worked, things like how publishing works, how a school's actually buying textbooks. They're not buying textbooks themselves. They are putting their book lists, and the parents are buying, and the subject needs to be on the entire thing, not just, an activity book on coding like we had intended. It's not mandated. It's not a mandatory part of the curriculum. The teachers don't know how to teach it. So there were just so many challenges that which we hadn't considered. And so we just assumed, okay, everyone, this is such a fantastic thing. We're going to do such a great job by building, making this book, and everyone will be buying it. And it was an absolute and abject failure very, very quickly. And then we realized that we are already selling classes. We already have so many kids involved. We already have parents that are sold and want their kids to go through this. So why don't we just grow and continue to grow that vertical, and then come back to schools if and when we have money to understand that market and the market needs a little bit better. And so that was our first pivot and our first failure. And you will be so surprised whenever you have to do market validation at the results that come out. But the market is what the market does. So, and then the next thing that's really going to shape your business is really thinking about what type of business are you building, right? Are you building for financial sustainability? Are you building for yourself to have money to keep it, something that you want to pass on, something where you will be comfortably off, if not for this generation, for the next couple of generations as well? Or do you want to do something where you are going to change the world, right? Where you are going to break how things are done, and you will do things in a new way because you have a new solution. right? So financially sustainable, I'm not saying there's anything that's good or anything that's bad, right? They are both equally valid ways of approaching a problem, right? But if you have so for example, for financially sustainable businesses, it's a more traditional business. This is what makes up the backbone of most economies, right? If the sector it's doing well, it typically requires inventory. It's funded by, traditional bank loans and so on and so forth. But changing the world businesses are they require scale. They involve creating something expensive upfront. Maybe it's very very risky. Very few pull it off, and the disruption is something that is very difficult to achieve. And so I'm just going to pause here. Like, can you think of examples of traditional businesses versus changing the world businesses? So if you can come up with, if you can put those in the chat, please let me know. Changing the world
Actually,
businesses.
Sadaf, we got a
Hmm.
few questions.
Sure.
So Khadija Munir is asking, what kept you going despite these challenges that you mentioned?
That what? Sorry, could you say that again?
Uh, what kept you going in terms of in your entrepreneurship journey, despite the challenges that you faced, as you mentioned?
It needs to be done, Khadija. It needed to be done. Even now, we're doing this because nobody else is doing it, and it needs to be done. If not us, then who? And if not now, then when? So, uh, okay. So I can't see the questions. I'm not sure if it's because I don't have the settings, but
Right.
maybe I can just go on actually to my. These are some of the game changers. So if anyone has heard of any of these, maybe you can put in why you think they were game changers. Or could I get access to what everyone is posting? Because I can't see that.
Right. They're in the in-call messages.
I see. Because I'm in the in call messages, but I'm not seeing what Khadija. I see. There you go. I was just on the wrong window. Traditional businesses can be blockbusters. Absolutely. Absolutely. So Netflix brought about streaming, right? So streaming was the game changer. Video streaming was the game changer. But did they invent it? YouTube invented it. YouTube was the game changer, right? They all succeeded. But look, Shazil, they all succeeded to fulfill the current needs of the masses. If you went to a time before cars and you asked what the masses wanted, they would have said faster horses, right? There are things that we're talking about when you change the world and the way things are being done. That's when you're inventing something that the masses have not even known that that they wanted, right? And so, so for example, PayPal, they invented e-currency or online payments, right? Delivery Hero invented the Food Panda delivery. Yes, taxis and Ubers. Uber was on. Why was Uber so innovative and disruptive? Airbnb, it's because you are leveraging the internet, yes, but it was the first of a kind where you could hail a taxi using just an app, or you could hail food and Delivery Hero using just an app or a website or the internet. WhatsApp was groundbreaking. It disrupted things. So often when I ask this question, Apple comes up, right? But Apple did not change the way things. They were good at design and they were very good at marketing and creating hype for their businesses. But what they did not, their products themselves were not game changers, right? Because they invented an iPad. Look at an iPod, for example, and they invented iPods when MP3 players existed. They came out with a phone when phones already existed. They came out with iPads when tablets already existed. They came out with the Macs when personal computers through IBM already existed. So the products that are changing the way you do something very very quickly. I mean, you guys have been here at the birth of AI, right? Like you have seen yourself how you have changed profoundly how you have interacted with the world around you. because of these new tools that you have available now, that's changing the way that you have done perhaps your homework or how you have interacted with the internet when you're looking for information. So that's just some food for thought when you're thinking of your own idea as well. So now that you have your vision, you have your idea, you've gotten some market validation, you now need to start delivering, right? So you need to start delivering and you have to start thinking about scalability, right? So what you need to, for example, figure out whether it's a tech, maybe you have a tech app, right? What's the supply chain? What is it that's needed? If you have maybe a business where you're providing some kind of service or you're providing some kind of product, how are you going to secure your sales? How are you going to onboard your early adopters? How are you going to set up the systems for delivery? All of those things are what you will immediately get into right after you get your idea and market validation, right? For us, straight up, like out the gate, the first problem we faced was, who is going to teach this program? Because if you remember, before we even incorporated or started doing this as a business, I was teaching this to my son and his friends. And so if I had gone down the financial sustainability route, I would have continued to teach like your tuition center teachers, right? They're making a lot of money. They're probably making more money than coach school at some point, some of these tuition teachers, right? But I knew that if we wanted to scale this to other countries around the world, it is beyond what one person can do. But the biggest bottleneck that we had to solve for was who is going to teach this? Because there isn't a degree in teaching coding for kids. Okay, you're either a programmer or you're a primary school teacher. And the Venn diagram of those two almost never intersects, right? If you think about it. And so what we decided to do was kind of identify some core requirements purely on skill, purely on merit. And that said, okay, if a candidate walks into the door with this technical knowledge, which takes 2 or 3 years for that candidate to build, then we will do the easy part, which is training and certifying them on how to teach, which can be done in a few months, right? And so that is how, and then we iterated and we tested it out across different instructors, different colleges, different degrees, different countries, different geographies. And then that's where that minimum supply chain allowed us to scale when demand increased. So think about not just your idea, your problem, what your vision is, what your approach to the business is, and what you want to do with it. But then know that very, very quickly you're going to have to solve for scale and delivery. And so the more you think about it and the more creative you become, the easier it'll be to resolve that issue when you hit that problem. So the next thing is, how do you scale, right? Because initially, we'll get to the funding bit as well. But initially, you're going to have to be very, very prudent and efficient with your resources. Always. I don't, whether you're funded or whether you're not funded. As a startup, you have to be very careful. Your opportunity cost of whatever you're doing is really, really high. So, some things you can do is, for example, automate processes, leverage, affordable tools instead of hiring, I don't know, a social media manager. Think about kind of exploring AI tools to do social media, if that's your thing, instead of hiring a designer to see if you can use Canva. So scaling doesn't always mean spending big money. It means kind of working smartly, right? And so, for example, think about this right now. And again, a time for like interaction. Tell me a little bit, guys. How are you doing something right now, or what kind of tool are you using right now that you think is saving you a lot of money? Something other people might be paying for, but you're getting it done in less. If you have any ideas at all, put them in the chat. It'll help out your fellow um, attendees as well. Chat GPT, I love it. And how are you using it though, Yaya? How are you saving money on Chat GPT? AI caption generator. I love it. Absolutely. Okay. I love these ideas. CapCut. In short, instead of CapCut. I like it. I'm taking notes on that one. Okay. So this kind of meshes really well with in when we had to be more efficient, at the same time we had to leverage, collaborate, engage experts, look at different tools on how we can get the same thing done. So for example, you know as an entrepreneur, you can't just make one thing and then expect it'll just work on its own or it'll sell on its own. The whole philosophy of make and they will come, I think it's just way too competitive and noisy out there for any of this to work. So there's this entire juggling act of marketing, sales, operations, partnerships, fundraising, customer service, tech management, finance, HR, that you as an entrepreneur will need to do, whether you know about it or not, right? And you often at the idea stage don't have the time or the money or the expertise to do all of those things. And so I think we were fortunate because obviously both my co-founder and I had a lot of experience in working, and we had a lot of networks of very senior people that we were leveraging because we ourselves were part of those networks. But for yourselves, it could be leverage your advisors, your mentors, leverage your professors, your classmates, your friends, your family, your colleagues if you work, you know. So that multidisciplinary approach, if you can think about it, plan for it, and know what your gaps are, and then try to fill them up through collaboration, it will be super helpful. I feel like we did not do this as well as perhaps we should have, or as early as we should have. We ended up trying to do everything ourselves, and then we did kind of face a slowdown. For example, if I was trying to focus on operations, marketing would fall. Then I'd work on marketing and then sales would grow, but then I'd turn back and operations weren't doing that well. And so, it's really, really helped when we've identified that, these are areas of expertise that we have within, the team, and then how do we kind of leverage them or how do we improve them. So one of the things I also wanted to kind of um, point out, because Sadaf at the beginning had mentioned that I was the technical lead for the National Curriculum Council for Computer Science, right? The way that it started was that I wanted to kind of give back. So there was Code School. I'd learned that here is the curriculum that kids need. It seems to be working. We're getting fantastic learning outcomes, and kids are having a ball because they're learning data structures and lists and insanely difficult things that I found in college, but they're learning them so early on, and they're learning them through making games. And so I wanted to kind of share that knowledge. And I was initially volunteering for the single national curriculum with Dr. Mariam Chugtai, and wanted to lend her our work to see if it could help inform, the middle school curriculum standards. And that work ended up with me being offered the technical lead position for the entire computer science curriculum reform. and that and that curriculum, by the way, hadn't been updated for like 10-15 years at that point. And so then we revamped it, and now we've also ensured that coding is now included in all national curricula. But there is the collaboration was unexpected. It was initially voluntary. It was initially done, but what it ended up doing is creating an ecosystem within Pakistan. So whether we know it or not, because right now majority of more than half of code school sales are coming from countries outside of Pakistan. But what we've done is by introducing programming into the national curriculum standards and in all of the boards, including metric and inter, what we've done is created an entire ecosystem almost that will now require coding. It will require teacher training for coding. It will require it will require curriculum for coding, and so on and so forth. Okay, so just to kind of super quick move on, this is perhaps the most important bit. We're going to be closing up, and maybe there's just a couple of more slides left. So funding. So again, this is standard stuff. I'm guessing you guys are already very familiar with all the material that's out there. If you're not, go to Y Combinator, go to their startup school. There are so many websites out there that are there to help, and so many accelerators out there, like the ones that we're in right now, that will have a lot of curriculum available for you to look at. But for me, my comment would be less around briefing you on the different kinds, and there is a graph. It's more about how you should approach money, right? So you can't do a business unless you have money, and you have to get comfortable with finance. And this I found is especially difficult for women. I am not sure why. I don't know if it's just my limited interactions with whoever I've with the entrepreneurs that I have worked with, but one of the biggest reasons that your startup would fail is because of raising too little or raising too much money, right? But mostly it's too little in the Pakistani context. So you have to know when you have to bootstrap, when you have to raise, how you have to raise it. And it is almost a full time job. It has been shocking to me how much time goes into fundraising. And I'm saying this because out of the 20 years, 10 that I've worked, 10 years have been in fundraising. So this is some standard stuff. This is from an image of Pitch Drive. You'll find 1,000 of them on the internet. The idea is that there is a friends, family, fools. It's called the triple F. When you have an idea and you need some capital, you have to go to people you know to give you money to start it, right? In case you can't collaborate it, in case you can't build it yourself or whatever, in case you can't just bootstrap from it, right? In case you need any startup capital. Then at the next stage, once you have gotten some money, and in case you're trying to get to proof of concept or try to build a prototype, the next stage will be getting an angel to help you, and then get to pre-seed. And these are all happening before you actually have a product in the market. This is when you're doing things like making a coding book and figuring out that, whoops, that wasn't the right strategy. Let's try to see if we can package the curriculum differently, and so on and so forth. And there is an amount of investment that's tied to it. There is a very much. And typically when you're raising, even angels even if you're talking to Pakistani VCs or Pakistani angels, they will all be talking to you in dollarized rounds that are because their funders are coming from outside of Pakistan. So you do have to the amounts are pretty much similar. I would say between 50 to 100 at max, maybe $300,000. In this case, there's euros here, but the dollar equivalent also works at the pre-seed stage. At the seed stage is when you have to take the product to market, right? So that's when you are actually selling it, getting your first sales, monitoring the growth, so on and so forth, and making whatever tweaks you need to make. And then after that, you have Series A, Series B, Series C, and you have a whole ton of series. Now, keep in mind, I have done my MBA. So I've literally gotten a gold medal in all of this. I've taken startup finance, I've taken venture finance. But this was so difficult. This part was so difficult for me to understand. So this book, Venture Deals, I've put this link in this at the bottom of this slide. You can. It's this fantastic book. Friends of mine who have raised in the US are always handed this the first time entrepreneurs once they get VC funding. You can go ahead and order it. I don't think it's available in Pakistan, but you can check their website and see what materials they may have. They have a newsletter that they send out as well that you can join if you're interested in this space. One thing that I will tell you though, because I would say we were more senior kind of entrepreneurs. We had a lot of experience, and we decided to self fund because for us, we did not want to give up equity, and because we understood the dark side of funding. Sometimes there's a benefit to building something on somebody else's dollar. right? Because you're not bearing the risk. Somebody else is taking the risk and they're getting a part of your company as a result. But for us, we wanted to make sure that we have enough time to build this right. Because as you know, the question Khadija asked, why are you still doing this when it's so difficult? We're doing this because we feel like it is so important for the future of Pakistan for kids to know how to code, that and nobody else is doing it, and it's quite frightening. And so in order nobody else is doing it in the way that we're thinking about doing it. So it's so important for us that we felt like we had to keep ownership and keep it within ourselves, and we were almost angel investors in our own business along with the sweat equity.
Okay.
So just keep
So
that in
sorry
mind.
for interrupting you, Sadaf, but we
Yeah.
have 10 minutes left. So
Yeah, it's 7:45. I'm watching the clock. Thank you.
yeah. All right, great.
All right. So we have the last slide, right, which is on what kills startups. There are 18 that are listed here, all right, which are from Y Combinator. More startups die from indigestion than starvation. So, but go through these. It's, I think, we pretty much have gone through the laundry list of all of them. The only things I mean, you'll see funny things like launching too slowly, but launching too early at the same time. It'll be raising too little money, raising too much money. It'll be, being inflexible, but it'll also be like ignoring customers and not being flexible enough. And so, you have to navigate like this razor's edge of how you are going the razor's edge of as you are doing the work. You need to figure out what's the best strategy, and that's why entrepreneurship is so agonizing, because you don't quite know at any given time if something is working or whether you've made the right decision or not. But two things that jump out at me was single founder. I think this is not really applicable to, I mean, I personally don't feel it's applicable because it depends on your age, it depends on your gender, it depends on how good you are in multitasking. And so yeah, co-founders are great, but then if you'll notice, one of the reasons why of failure is also because of co-founder conflict. So maybe sometimes single founder is easier. I would also kind of want to talk about bad location, because we are in Pakistan. You guys are starting in a country where the ease of business is atrocious. We're one of the worst countries in the world to run a business. And there's a financial fence, there's a literal financial fence around Pakistan, and getting money or capital in and out is incredibly difficult. It's possible, but it's much more challenging than it would be in other freer flowing markets. And so I would also challenge this idea that a bad location can kill you. It is very likely that it might, but you can also look at it from the perspective of, we have 250 million people. We know our problems, we can solve our own problems, and we can be big enough and make enough money without having to worry about whether we're located in Silicon Valley or not. And so the way that we looked at it, for example, at Code School, was that we converted or wanted to see how lower down the market we could go. And the idea was that if we can teach this in a village school, with a metric pass teacher, and then that means that this can be relevant in low resource markets, not just in Pakistan, but also, for example, in India, or also in East Africa, and so on and so forth. And so that's that we took this as a home ground advantage, because we would know this area and being in a low resource market much better than perhaps, say, other companies that are from better funded kind of countries. So on that note, I think I just wanted to very quickly show a 1-minute video, because I absolutely love it, and this kind of answers why we're doing what we're doing, and then I will just open up the floor to questions. Oops, sorry.
We're in Dubai. My children are going to a top school in Dubai. Even my eldest has been selected as part of the gifted and talented program for computing in his school. But genuinely, I feel that the only help he's getting in this area is from Code School.
मुझे कोडिंग क्लास में बहुत मजा आता है। पहले जब हमारा स्टार्ट था, वो मुझे कुछ समझ नहीं आता था, समझने में बहुत टाइम लगता था, बहुत मुश्किल होती थी। अभी हमें बहुत टाइम हो गया क्लास करते हुए, तो मैं अभी इतना हो गया कि मैं अपनी जेब बना सकता हूँ अकेले और मैं चाहता हूँ कि ये क्लास कंटिन्यू।
I was inspired so much in the field of computer science that I ended up pursuing it in my O and A level.
I like Code School because the teachers help you learn coding in a fun way.
We can be anywhere in the world, in any time zone. In the US, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, in the mountains, in the dead of winter by the beach, and Isaac can connect.
Everything is really fun and you should definitely try it. Well, that's it.
All right. On that note, thank you all so much. I hope this was helpful. And I will stop sharing and let's have your questions.
All right. I guess I'll ask the first question.
Mhm.
So, in terms of sort of like you mentioned how you have to sort of flesh out your idea. You can't just brainstorm at the back of the envelope, right? So, in terms of, would you maybe perhaps tell us some tips on how to brainstorm? Sort of some tips in terms of that on how to brainstorm. Yeah.
Sure. Use Ikigai, right? So the point of showing the Ikigai tool was to help you identify a problem that you have that you're trying to solve for, and then think about how are you going to approach this problem, right? Like, so this webinar is pretty much the how to brainstorm. So you would use Ikigai to find out what are your personal interests, what are your unique skills, what is an area that you love, how are you going to come up with a solution, validate that solution, how are you going to fund that solution, and how are you going to make sure that you come up with some very quick kind of tools that can help you get to the first sales that will help you kind of get to wherever you need to get to. So I think use this webinar as the roadmap to get to your idea and your solution and your brainstorming. I can see Yaya has a question. What's the best way to pitch an idea that's socially impactful to investors that could be profitable to them as well? So social impact, Yaya, is, and just to give you an example, I've worked at Acumen back in 2010, which was one of the first social impact funds in the world. And so so you have to look at who you're talking to, right? Because 9 times out of 10, social impact funds are looking at the money, okay? The financials will outweigh the social impact. So 90% of your presentation needs to be on financial impact, and the product needs to then also encompass, maybe 10% of your maybe one slide on how that is going to be socially impactful as well. And an obvious one will be the industry itself will determine whether it's socially impactful, right? So if you are working in climate change, for example, it's understood that the industry is the where you're going to have the impact, and it's a good industry to be in. But for example, your presentation pitch will need to be how are you going to make money within that and be financially sustainable. Investors are only going to give you money if they can get it back. Okay, investors, let me say this again, investors will only give you money if they can get it back. And so just be very clear when you are pitching for money, know or for what purpose somebody is listening to you, and just make sure that you are answering or already answering their questions in the pitch. If you want to look at a good pitch format, Y Combinator is the gold standard. They have a pitch deck format that every accelerator pretty much around the world is using. So you can just download it and make sure that you get those slides working. Okay.
Sadaf, we just have a minute left for the call, and we would really like to thank you for making out time for this wonderful session.
Oh, thank you. No, this was such a pleasure to be here. We got such a great turnout. And so thank you guys for doing this. Super excited. And if any of you are computer science, which I guess you all are, in computer science, do definitely look up Code School. We do hire undergrads even in their third year. So we would absolutely love to have you guys on board. And do check out our website and follow us. Thank you. Thanks, Amna. Thanks, Sadaf.
It's actually Jannat.
Janet, sorry. Should I close?
Right. So we also have the links that she's mentioned in the in-call messages.